Hello and welcome to this tutorial. We're going to talk about how we go about backing up and upgrading the iOS on a router. Now, oftentimes a new feature will come out in an iOS that you want to use, and the only way to get that feature on your router is to upgrade the iOS. Other times you may want to upgrade your iOS because you're experiencing a particular problem. Perhaps there's a bug in the iOS you're currently using, and the solution to that bug, the fix, is located in the next version. So you have to go ahead and get that new version and apply it to your router. Those are two really good reasons and common reasons why you will want to upgrade your router iOS. Now, part of the upgrade process is backing up the iOS, but even if you're not going to upgrade the router, it's a good idea to back up your iOS anyway. That way you have a safe copy someplace else in the network should you ever need to access it. So that's what we're going to focus on today, how we actually go about backing up the router iOS, and then we'll go ahead and actually upgrade the router iOS as well. So let's start with backing up. We're going to use this diagram to get an overview of what we're going to be working with. So we have router A, and we want to go ahead and back up the router iOS on router A. That means keeping a safe copy someplace else. And it's always good to keep a copy because you may have to go back to it. You may have to use it at another time. The safest place to keep your iOS, or at least a copy of it, is off of the router. Because if the router dies for whatever reason, you may not be able to access it anymore. So what's commonly done is putting a copy of the iOS on what is called a TFTP server. And we have one right up here. Now, TFTP stands for Trivial File Transfer Protocol. And this is a very simple protocol. There's no authentication used. There is very little user interaction in order to use it. And it's really often used for very quick file transfers. And it's a very common thing to use in networks today to do just this, to back up iOSs. So, quite simply, the backing up process means we're going to copy the iOS from router A over to the TFTP server. In order to do this, we need to know a couple things. We need to know the IP address of the TFTP server, and we need to know that the router can actually reach it, because remember, it's going to copy the file to the TFTP server. Now, we don't get into all the details of setting up a TFTP server. There are some free open source versions online you can go ahead and download. They're not too hard to set up. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and jump on router A and start to begin the backup process. Now, the first thing we need to do is to see if we can reach the TFTP server. So that means you need to know the IP address. For our setup here, the IP address is 10.10.10.10. That's our TFTP server. So quite simply, from router A, I'm just going to try to ping it to confirm connectivity from the router. And this looks good. I can reach it, and it's a pretty fast round trip time. So now the second part is, I know what the TFTP server is, and I know I can reach it. Now what am I going to copy over to it? Well, this is an iOS backup. So let's see what file we're using right now on the router. So if we issue the show version command, it tells us right here what iOS the router is currently running on. So this image is located in the flash memory. I can also now just go ahead and issue the show flash command, and here we can see the image itself. So now I know what I'm going to copy and where it's located. So in order to do this, I'm going to issue the copy flash, because that's the memory where the image is located, and I'm going to issue the destination of TFTP. Now it's going to ask me for the source file name, meaning what file do we want to copy over? Well, we know it. It's right here, or it's located right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this over so I don't make any spelling mistakes. Next, it's going to ask us for the IP address or the name of the TFTP server. I'll go ahead and put that in, 10.10.10.10. And now it's going to ask us, what do you want this file to be called on the TFTP server? It's a good idea to leave the file name the same. So I will take the default, which is in the brackets there. And if we have connectivity, it will immediately start copying the file over to the TFTP server. Each one of these exclamation points is considered a little bit of indicating a little bit of data has been successfully sent over. Sometimes you may have a problem in your network. Perhaps a link becomes too full with other traffic, or you're experiencing errors and some packets are dropped along the way. Or there may be other local problems on this router. If you ever see a little period show up in place of one or more of these exclamation points, that indicates usually that packets are not making it over to the TFTP server, so you might have a problem there. Now, the speed of the file transfer depends as well on a couple different things. First, you may have a very small file, or you may have a very large file. And then also it depends on how far away the TFTP server is. Is it on the same network? Is it in a different network? Also, if you're experiencing any type of packet loss, that'll slow down the transfer as well. Finally, the TFTP server itself may be under a lot of load. Maybe a lot of people are using it, so it can only take in so much information at a time. Those factors could influence how quickly this will take. Now for us, you can see we just finished, and it gives you this nice little output here at the end. It gives you some statistics on how quickly you copied over the image. This happened pretty quickly. And that's it. That is the whole process of backing up the router IOS. Now, if you have access to your TFTP server, you can go ahead and console into that server or SSH in and go to the directory where you believe this file should now be, and it's a good idea to confirm that it's actually where you believe it should be. That way you have confirmation that the file is in fact on there. So that process is pretty easy. It's very straightforward. You're just making a copy of the iOS and sending it to a remote TFTP server. So the upgrade process is relatively similar. Here, we start off with a new image on the TFTP server, and we want to go ahead and put it onto router A. So what we'll do in this case is we're going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to copy the file from the TFTP server over to router A. So let's go ahead and jump on router A and perform this part of the process. Okay, so we're on router A, and the first thing, like last time, I want to do is to ping my TFTP server just to confirm again that I still have access to it. I can connect to it. And I do. All of the pings are successful. So that's step one. Step two is I want to go ahead and take a look at our flash memory. In order to do that, I issue the show flash command. And here it tells us all of the contents of the flash directory. And you can see we only have one file. That's the current iOS that's running on this router. Now just below it, it tells you how much of the available space you've used, and likewise how much you have available. So this is important because when you copy a new file over, you need to confirm that you actually have room in your flash memory to store the new file. So I happen to know the new iOS we're going to copy over is just about the same size as the current one, just under 8 megabytes. You can see here we have about 25 megabytes available to us in our flash. So we're in good shape. Sometimes you may have to delete your current file in order to make room for the new file, which again is a good reason why you back it up first, because once you delete it, it's gone. Okay, so now that we have checked off our requirements, we can go ahead and start the copying. This time, when we issue the copy command, we're going to state the TFTP server first, and then the flash, because the TFTP is the source, and the flash is the destination. We hit enter, and it prompts us for the same information as last time. Now, it's going to remember the information we used the last time we copied, so it's prompting us for the IP here. If that's the correct one, you just hit enter. In this case, it is. Now, the source file name this time has changed. The new file name, I will go ahead and type in here. and it asks me if I want to keep the destination file name the same when I copy it to the router, and of course I do. It makes tracking your IOSs much more easier that way. And so it'll begin to contact the TFTP server, and it'll ask me, do I want to erase my flash before copying? I don't want to. I want to keep both copies on here. So I'm just going to hit End for no, and it'll immediately start copying the file over. If I had said yes, the router would have first erased all of the files in the flash, and then it would have started copying over the new iOS. Okay, we fast-forwarded the video so that you didn't have to suffer through watching all of the exclamation points pop up as the file transferred over. If you've seen that once, you've seen it a million times, so you're not missing much there. At the end, you can see this verify checksum OK. That means the router performs a check on the file to make sure it was copied over without any errors and that the file was not altered in any way from the source. That's important because we want this file to run properly when it boots up. Now at this point, let's go ahead and look at our flash directory again. And now you can see two files are in there. We have the original 12.3.20 and we have the new one 12.3.22. Now at this point I have two choices. I can go ahead and get into configuration mode and issue one of the boot system commands in order to specify loading a particular file. Or I can go ahead and jump out of configuration mode and then actually delete the old file. Depends what you want to do. You have choices here. If you go ahead and delete the old file, then you only have one iOS remaining, at least in my example here, and so when the router reloads, you know it's going to definitely reload the new image, or the only image that's left. If you want to keep both images on there, then you can go ahead and specify one of the boot system commands. If you haven't yet, take a moment to review the configuration register tutorial where we talk about using the boot system commands in conjunction with the settings of the configuration register. Okay, and so that completes the process of copying the new iOS over to the router. At this point, what we want to do, depending on how we want to determine our iOS to load, we would just go ahead and issue the reload command, and the router would come up running the new image. Okay, so to summarize everything we covered, we know that the upgrade and backup process of an iOS involves a TFTP server, which stands for Trivial File Transfer Protocol. And essentially in each case, we're going to copy a file from the router to the TFTP server in order to back up the iOS. And then to get a new iOS onto the router, we copy from the TFTP server to the router. So the commands we issue to do that are these. And the basic format is you copy from the source to the destination. So for our backup, we copied flash to TFTP, and then in order to upgrade, we copied from the TFTP to the flash. And then keep in mind all of the requirements and the fine details that you have to perform in order to complete the upgrade or the backup. So for instance, make sure you can ping your TFTP server. Make sure once you've copied the new file to the TFTP server, confirm that it's actually on there. Jump on the TFTP server and get some proof positive that it's there. And then during the upgrade, confirm you have enough room in your flash in order to store your new iOS. Once you've copied the new file over, determine how you want to indicate to the router which iOS you want to load, either deleting the old iOS or using some boot system commands in order to specify exactly which iOS to load. Okay, and so that's it. That is how we back up and upgrade the router iOS. Thanks for watching.